Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Is this on? Is that? Yeah, it is. Good. Thank you very much. Please, first of all, I should apologize in advance if I speak too quickly. This is not because I think you can't understand me, but I always tend to do it at home. My wife tells me. So if I'm speaking too quickly, please stop and tell me. It's a great privilege that I've been asked to chair this panel of such distinguished musicians, and we have been asked to address certain issues which you can see in the program. Basically, first of all, to look at where choral conducting training is now in our respective countries, and a very interesting question also, can you earn your living as a choral conductor? And the challenges and problems. But we would like to have time to look as positively as possible at where we need to go from here in our countries, and what recommendations we might be able to pass on at the end of the afternoon, and yours included. I don't think we want to speak non-stop for the five of us for an hour and a half, or an hour and 20 minutes, and leave time for questions at the end. So please, at any point, if you want to interject, then please do tell us. Please indicate that you would like to add something. So I'll start by, well, let's have ladies first. So I'll start by asking Mrs. Kocsár to say something about her background in choral training and the great Hungarian tradition that we have.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to tell you that I had in the past time, I had 40 years in teaching, but today I'm just being at home caring my husband and my family. But I spent 4 decades teaching, conducting, choral conducting in the Teacher Training Institute of the Liszt Academy. And it was a very, very special subject. Beside the choral conducting, I taught other subjects as well, but focusing now only to the choral conducting training. In the very first 10 years in the institutions, we trained instrumental teachers for music schools, and all students must study choral conducting as well. That was a very special decade, because I would say honestly that half of them was not happy at all with conducting. Some of them already played different first-class orchestras in Hungary. So I had lots of students around in Hungary. There is no orchestra in Hungary where I can't find any former students. So that's a good feeling. That is a happiness of our job. And after 10 years, they changed the program. From the 3 years program, they became a 4-year program, and the choral conducting subject was not compulsory anymore. Students who wanted to study choral conducting, they may choose the subject. So I had piano students, violin students, bassoon students, and other ones who wanted to get this subject, and we trained them for 2 years. After these 2 decades, there was a big change, and since then I had, and I must say that that was the highlights of this teacher training institution program, because we started a 4-year program specialized training musicianship teacher, what we call solfege teacher, and choral conductors. And that is what I'd like to say a couple of words about this program. It meant that in every year we had a minimum 8, maximum 12 students. They were quite small groups. And each year we had separately 4-6 students, what we call a choral conducting training. And the first year student combined with the third year students, they made what we call the subject a choral direction, in which the third year students were conducting, while the two groups of students were singing, making a chamber choir. The year 2 and the year 4 students made another choir in which the second year student had this small group of people for choir direction. And the 4-year students together made another, not a big choir, what we call a diploma choir. And the program was to prepare program twice a year, making concerts in public, showing how well-trained they are. So that was the skeleton of the choral conducting program, which was really good in that program. I think that we use piano if we need for accompaniment or a missing voice, but most of the time we use the human voice. And that was very important in choral conducting because the students learned how their affection, how their own movement can create a good or a wrong starting note, or how to breathing, how to making musical phrases. And the other subject could be what was the material, and that is, I think, another topic. I spoke enough now for the beginning.
Köszönöm szépen. Thank you very much, Ildikó. So let's follow on in Hungary with István. If you'd like to pick up from there and take us on.
Thank you. I can look back in choral conducting here in this building for more than a half century. And during this time, there were long periods when the thing was going well and well organized, and the classes had, in average, 10-15 members. Nowadays, we are in a much worse condition. I begin with the number. The classes have maximum 4 members. From this point of view, it's visible that nowadays doesn't exist a school year choir, but several years are coming together for having a so-called adapt group. In the former time, when the average number was 15, about 15, even the repertoire of our programs could be much, much wider. That's natural. One thing is, which didn't change during many, many decades. The rehearsal time is always short. And it is also a task to make attention for the students, how can they use out better their time, what is now quite short. But there are some types who are liking very much conducting, but much more are they liking to speak. And with speak is going out the time. In average, again, to try to bring together this long, long time, I must say that in the classes where we had about 10, 15 members, always was somebody or several personalities who were outstanding. Now, when we have really short classes, the problem is much more complex, because even at the beginning isn't such a difference between the students who are able to continue these studies at all after their previous musical abilities. I think even in this case, if anybody has a strong imagination and has effective gestures, always we find somebody or more persons who they do as their best, even with these conditions. And so we aren't unhappy in this situation, only we know how to go on, and we hope that in the next future, when here at our academy is again the admission exam, not for BA 3 years and MA 2 years, but now is coming back the 5 years plus 1 year. We don't know yet how will be this admitting exam in this year, because this will be the first occasion. We hope that we will be able to continue our work, which is, I think, usable for the Hungarian choirs, although in our small country we must speak mostly about amateur choirs, because the highest number of professional choirs, if I count some situations also to the professionals, maybe 5. That means that they need every 30, 40 years 5 persons. But we hope that we will be able to go on, and in this in this hope, we are going on in our work with our most energy.
Thank you, István. I'm sure you still have the same energy. I know that. Remarkable. So we've heard already this morning something of Estonia from Anu, and maybe Raul would like to give us a picture of conducting training as it is in Estonia,
okay,
and for teachers, or however you.
I try to do my best in this meaning that at first I'd really like to say that in this moment I'm in a Mecca, because I was one of the first students or pupils who were beginning with Kodály method in '66, and I have finished all this system of his relative music reading system. So in Estonia it was called Jolemi. It is the same in Hungary. But when we are going to this point, how it's choral conducting taught in Estonia. This is because we are a small country, it's easy to say. We have one school of two schools of college level, one music high school, and there are three university levels schools where you can study choral conducting. In this music high school and in the two colleges, there is the program of conducting is 2 lessons per week for 45 minutes and during 3 years. Afterwards, they can go to Tallinn Music Academy, or in Viljandi is also music more based on folklore developing, but the Tartu University department, when you can also study choral conducting, and there is Tallinn University, where is a music department where you can study. And in Viljandi and in Tallinn University, you can study 1 hour, academic hour per week, and in Tallinn Music Academy, you can study 2 academic hours per week. And this is all based on quite an, how to say, old-fashioned way of choral conducting teaching. It came back from the years of St. Petersburg, what Estonian professional musical life had their roots. And all those, I think, very good attention to music, what some of our musicians have is coming from there. And now, when we are teaching our choral conductors, of course, it is very nice to always to say that we are singing nation. We have many choirs. We really do have. We have more than 1,400 choirs. We have singing celebration after every 5 years for all the singers, and every 5 years for young children. Of course, you need their conductors also. But the idea of speaking about choral conducting is still, as I feel here in this conference, is something much more. So the singing festival is not a big choir singing. Singing festival should be a lot of choirs, in high-level choirs involving and going into this. And this way, may I then please ask to go with this material we have there, and I was mentioned that this, how to say, choral conducting tradition is quite old-fashioned in Estonia. We still have all those lessons in colleges, in high school, and in university level. We have a private lesson with accompanist and student and a teacher. This is one of our exams. You will see during half an hour how they are conducting so-called tapestry. And let this be our tapestry. Now you can see how their scheme is going and how they can imaginate the choir before their eyes. Of course, there is studied solfege, there is small study choirs, as I understand you have from students. And this, what we tried to go or to reach in Estonia in somehow is to maintain, to keep understanding that music making is always rehearsing also. Nowadays, global world is very often saying that, oh, I'm very intelligent anyway. I'm very creative. That why do I have to practice something? But music is a special field. Even the choir conducting is a special field. You have to practice your manual skills, of course, the other skills. And now when I'm going back to Eva Kollar's speech today morning, choral conductor is somehow like a superhuman, because I was reading what the conductor must do, and it is fantastic. I never can be such kind of person, but anyway, we have to try to reach to this point that all the students who are studying choral conducting understand what they are doing. They have to have a question, why? This is the main question, because when I have honest answer to myself why I'm doing this, then probably I can be a good conductor. Otherwise, I cannot do this. For decades and years, we have doing quite the same type of choral teaching in Estonia, but something has been changing during last, let's say, 15 years. And it is the contact or the thinking of society of choral conductors or musicians. It means, Eva Kollar was saying in the morning, amateur choirs need professional conductors. Yeah, it's very good to say, okay, yes, we try to be as professional as possibility. But when the society is not taking this also as a profession or part of professional cultural life, then all the work is waste. Because when you do not have a support from society, you will not study in 100%. You are just making fun of being there and waving the tapestry. A lot of skills the choral conductors have to have. With this old-fashioned system, we know in Estonia there is in our teaching there are a lot of things to improve. For example, vocal training, and this is a thing we are working in Estonian Choral Society now, trying to work forward. It means as a trainer of football team or young football team, he never gets a job when he doesn't know how the muscles are working, and especially when he ruins the muscles of young children. But when the music teacher ruins the vocal cords of the first class teacher. Nobody sues him, and everything is like okay. So this is the way we are moving our studies in Estonia now to make more importance of singing really in choir singing or choir conducting studies also. And I think that's for this beginning. I hope it is enough.
Very good start, please.
I have a question. At the conducting lessons, even now, there is an accompanist.
Yes.
And why don't the students play?
It is a good question, because their skills always are not so
Not
good,
enough?
not enough to play the choral partiture.
But is this a task for the future?
Yes, of course. Yeah. We are teaching also a partiture.
Yeah.
Also such.
Excuse me.
It was very important question.
Yes, a very fair question. So let's move. These are two countries which we are aware of and have been particularly aware of here in this great building. These are two countries which have a very strong folk music tradition, and this folk music tradition is very much bound into the whole of the choral writing. And is one of the reasons, I think, for also the success in school education, that this closeness with the folk material, which I think perhaps Michael will say certainly in Britain, and I think also in Germany, is not quite the case. So we're looking at a slightly different way. So Michael, would you like to tell us something about Germany?
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy to be here and to have this discussion with you. And in the German, we have a long tradition of choral singing and choral conducting, but since 2 or 3 years we have a new situation, because the study has changed, and we are in this so-called Bologna process, where all the universities and academies and Musikhochschulen have to look how they make the studies comparable to other universities and other academies. A very good idea, indeed, but the result is that every academy and every university and every Musikhochschule makes his own thing. And there are some things to tell in general. In this new form of study, we have the teacher who is studying music, and he's making bachelor and master. And in the bachelor, he has 3 years. And in this 3 years, he has to take 4 semesters in choral conducting to get the basics. And this is not very much, but he can follow, or she can follow, when she's doing masters, 4 semesters more. But the most important thing of this new form of study is that they can choose conducting, equal choral or orchestral conducting, as a main subject. So they have the main subject conducting, the second subject piano, and the third subject voice. And so these people, I have now 3 students who are studying this, are very good in their opportunities of learning much. The students who have conducting as a main subject, they get 60 minutes lesson, single lesson a week. And of course, they have also to admit the working choirs. And for the normal teachers, they have to do 3 semesters in a normal choir, and this normal choir is 120 minutes a week. And so every student who attends this working choir is able to stand 2 times before the choir in a semester to work 20 minutes with the choir and to introduce and to work a piece with this choir. The group is about 16 to 20 people, and they have also to make, beside this what I have told, a choral vocal training for 1 hour a semester. So they have a good possibility to learn much about singing. They have good ability to learn much about conducting, and they have the possibility to work with a choir to see where their own person is going. I think it's very interesting, and it's one of the most important things that we encourage the young people who want to conduct, that we encourage them to do our best that they can express themselves with the choir and with the orchestra if they are doing orchestra conducting. And so I think this is the situation at the Musikhochschule Köln. And as I said before, with the Bologna process, you cannot compare all the universities and you cannot compare all the Musikhochschule. There are other places, they have other ideas. But I think in Cologne we are on a good way, and with this new bachelor and master in choral conducting, they have a good possibility to get the things and the skills to work in schools with choirs. And what I have learned here in Budapest is that I thought coming here, well, we in Germany, we have a special problem with singing, of course, because in the first part of the 20th century, the folk music of Germany was ridiculously used. And after the Second World War, singing was something with a color. With a bad color, yes. And but there are many choirs in Germany, and they are increasing choirs of very good quality. And we have many choirs, men's choirs, for example, but the old one are dying, and there are now coming new men's choirs. And if I have looked to the choral situation in Germany, I would say we have 2 different lines. We have one line of the semi-professional and the professional choirs who are very good, mostly good, but very good. And we have another line where the amateur choirs are getting more and more old. And of course we have now church musicians who have no church choir, but they have a children's choir. And so also the way of studying church music has changed. Now the church musicians also do something in a children's choir and leading a children's choir. So we have very much different situations, and I think it is not to be said that the situation in Germany is like this or like that. But in general, to see there is much interest in singing and choral conducting, and on the place we can put the things in the right way. I think we have done a bit on the right way.
Thank you. Michael, thank you very much. A lot of themes have actually emerged over the last 2 or 3 days, which keep on cropping up, actually, I think, to make us think, what is a choral conductor? And how much can a choral conductor be? Taking it from from Eva this morning, that list of what we should be ideally as a conductor is very testing, as Raul said. And we also have this question as to whether a teacher in a classroom is a choral conductor. Or should a teacher in a classroom be trained as a choral conductor? After all, if our children are not singing in the primary schools, when are they going to? It was interesting that on I don't know where the time's gone this week, but the keynote speech on the first day from Laszlo, when he referred to Kodály Zoltán visiting Britain and being amazed at the great musical tradition of choirs and the standard of the great choral societies, as well as the church choirs and so on. Those choral societies are not in the same healthy condition now that they were in the 1930s, nor are the great male voice choirs in Wales that there were in the 1930s, because the social conditions have changed completely. The big choirs have got older and older and fewer and fewer. Those attached to the major orchestras in London, for example, or in Birmingham, very vibrant choirs, but the older choral societies, the big choirs, don't exist in the same way. But there are more and more young chamber choirs, young people with some ambition to sing at a high level and don't like singing in very big choirs because you can't feel the same sense of responsibility. The singing in schools, the reference to Kerwin and the standard of sight singing in the 1930s, well, we now have, since maybe 20 years, we now have a national curriculum in our schools. For many years we didn't have. We now have a national curriculum which includes music from the youngest up to at least up to 14. So music should be safeguarded. However, social conditions again have really affected what was going on, and the training of teachers has affected that. Some years ago, anyone who was a general classroom teacher in a primary school, everybody had some musical training. Maybe not particularly advanced, certainly not in the league of these countries, but they were given some musical training every week. They had some hours. This has almost completely disappeared from the curriculum for the class music, for the general teacher. And there are very, very few primary schools in the UK who have specialist music teachers. So although music is in the national curriculum, it's not easy for the teachers to deliver it because they're not specialists and they get very, very little support, sadly. We have occasional initiatives when we notice. And 3 years ago, we had a government-backed campaign called Sing Up, to encourage music in primary schools. But as with so many government initiatives the world over, it was funded for 2 years. And then the money was taken away, and whatever good was happening tends to go with it. It seems amazing, really, for people from the rest of the world, I know, are constantly amazed, but because Britain has this great choral reputation, the great cathedral choirs, all the professional choirs, there has been almost no training for conductors in the UK until the last 10 or 15 years. That anybody in the UK who has studied choral conducting has done it in another country. Most of us are actually autodidacts. We have learnt the hard way, or probably our choirs have suffered as we've learnt. And we've learnt from observing, and we've learnt from listening to choirs. But there was virtually no choral conducting training as such. I think, personally, I've always believed that one of the problems Raul referred to, if there's no respect from the community for music making, singing and so on, then it doesn't work. I think one of the problems we have I don't know about other countries, but certainly in the UK, one of the problems is that within the music profession itself, there is no respect for amateur music making in the choral world. That the conservatoires don't seem to see the importance of amateur choirs having professional conductors, which, as we've discovered, we all know that this is true. We need professional training to be able to teach young children. We need vocal understanding, but this has not been accepted by the conservatoires in general. So we now have a position where we have, fortunately, some training at master's level, not at bachelor level. At master's level at the Royal Academy of Music, Patrick Russell, who is the organist at Brompton Oratory, big Catholic church in London, he's a very clever guy. He started the conducting training as part of the church music department, so that was all right. But then somehow or other he managed to have it transferred into the conducting faculty without anybody noticing somehow, and it now has a real life of its own and a great respect and some very good students. They work with students from the academy as a choir occasionally. They also work with the BBC singers, so they work with professional choirs, and they work also with amateur choirs like mine. We have done the occasional session with the students from the Royal Academy. This is, it's a very good, well-organized course. It's aimed, of course, really at producing an elite choral conductor, I suppose one would say, not somebody who is going to be exclusively dealing in schools. The training should be the same. The training should be the same level. To hear that once upon a time all teaching students had to study choral conducting is a sort of dream. But it's a very good course, and we now have also in Cardiff a very, very successful new master's degree in choral conducting, which is fantastically part of the vocal department. I say fantastically because I know, not just from here, but from meetings with colleagues, that very often there's a resistance from singing teachers to their students singing in choirs. It's bad for you to sing in a choir, don't join the choir. It's a difficult position to get round, so it's fantastic that in Cardiff we have a department where the vocal department work closely with the choral conducting class, and it works very, very well as a result. What else can I say? We have set up, through our Association of British Choral Directors, or ABCD for short, we have set up some courses for conductors, for people who are actually doing it. One of my colleagues, when we were starting this, he was worried. He said, I'm not sure that we should be doing this. He said, we're going to give people the impression that they will be able to have a job conducting choirs. I said, no, this is not what we're hoping to do, certainly not what we're aiming to do. But there are people out there who are doing it who have never had any training. And why don't we help them? We have got experienced conductors, we have got conducting teachers, and we should be in the position to be able to help those people who have been doing the job. And it's been most interesting because our students have ranged from university students studying music, primary school teachers who have been teaching and have a choir, have been asked to take a choir, people who have been asked to take over a church choir, people who have been conducting choirs for 30 years. Most amazing courage, I think, some people have to put themselves up in front and to take criticism and teaching in front of their colleagues. In these courses, the students are the choir. The students sing for each other. They provide the choir, rather like we were talking about this morning in the choral conducting 21st century. It's a very safe environment for them to learn in, because everybody understands the difficulties, and they feed back to each other, as well as the tutor giving some information, which is valuable. And we've structured these courses so that they have for example, an opening weekend, and then 4 one-day sessions spread out over 6 months, 7 months, and a final closing weekend. And they are always videoed, they are always recorded, and they can then now. It used to be, in the old days of VHS, very easy just to give them a tape straight afterwards. Now we have to upload them onto YouTube or something, a private one. They can watch themselves, they can watch each other again in between, and they work with their choirs. They have to have a choir to be on their intermediate course. We run initial courses. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but it's what we're trying to do is to provide something for those who are already doing it. It's too late, once they're out there in the community. I would love it, the day to come when this was unnecessary, because everybody who works with choirs will have had the opportunity to be trained. But while it isn't happening, there we are. And I'd just like to pick up on 1 or 2 other things before we share this more, and ask you to join in. When Raul was talking about vocal health as being something that is very important for us to understand as choral conductors, and I think one thing that is very, very useful to think of is something that Joy Hill was talking about, is collaboration at every stage. The choral conductor can collaborate with other people, and sometimes it's a vocal coach that's needed. Sometimes it might be something to do with presentation that's needed. And I think we need to think, as we say, outside the box a little more as choral conductors, and not only think of the way that things have been done. I think that was a very good point. And it's interesting how, as we move away from the idea of the choral conductor being an authority figure, making the decisions and giving more responsibility to the singers, there's more and more development of vocal ensembles, which is a very, very positive thing, because very often from these vocal ensembles will appear conductors and teachers who go out, and it's an additional element. I've talked enough too. I'm more than anybody. So please, before we move on to can you make a living for choral conducting, which I think will be a very brief part of the discussion, would anybody like to add anything at this point from the floor? I say from the floor, it's difficult to see anybody out there. No, not yet. Okay, later. So, please, Michael.
Well, perhaps the audience will awake again if we are putting one word in the audience and also here on the desk. I think now we have times where many things in making music are changing. And the CDs, the internet, everything is every time to be heard, mostly everything. And our social community has changed. And the romantic idea of little villages meeting together and singing doesn't exist. Perhaps in 3 villages in Germany, but none, not in the cities. So we are in a change, and in this change we can say, okay, we are waiting and looking how the change will go, or we can say, now we want to be on the top of the changing movement. And when we want to be at the top of the changing movement, then we must say, what is changed? And for example, there is something which I can see very close. The people who are studying in my choir or in the Musikhochschule, they don't want, this was your word, to have the master who shows them how to conduct, but they want to have the partner who has much experience and who shares the experience with them to get the best of them out. And so I have, in the first time when I was teaching, I had this old picture of, well, the student wants to know how to do, I tell him, and everything is going okay. But I tried to change very much because I can see how big the interest was, and I could feel that I can help the students much more better being their partner, being their senior partner, to say, well, if you want to study this piece, look at this, and have you done that? And then after they have studied the piece with a choir, well, we should have a look on your conducting technique and to improve many things. So this is quite another situation of studying music and teaching conducting. And I'm of the opinion that teaching in music and conducting and making music with other people is every time combined. I can, if I make a rehearsal with people, I teach them music. And this can be teaching in music in kindergarten, or this can be teaching in music with a professional choir. So I think we must go the way to be partners of the choirs, be partners of the students who want to study conducting.
István.
I have a question for you. Are the admission conditions the same for the choral conductors and the orchestra conductors or not?
In this case, they are the same.
At the beginning and later?
And later, well, I think the orchestra conductors who are studying teaching have less possibilities to work with their instrument.
Yeah, that must be so.
So I think in this situation, of course, in former times, the choral conductors ever looked to the real conductor who was standing before the orchestra.
In the heaven.
Yes. And but now I think the both parts are equal. And on the possibility to study teacher for choral conducting, to study also teacher in the main subject orchestra conducting, we have also in the rules the university is giving the same quality.
Thank you.
Raul, would you like to come in at this stage?
I was thinking just about this partnership. One colleagues of mine have been saying where music begins, where democracy ends, in this conducting meaning. I strongly believe that in rehearsal time it is, and in study time it's very okay. But somehow I have a feeling that what we have to do is also to teach individualities to be honest before the collective, before the choir, before the orchestra, that not always saying, what do you think on the second viola? Is it okay now, or how should we do this soprano part? This is a very difficult job, and as Eva Kola told, you have to really, at the end of your studies, be sure that you really want to go forward, to be in front of singers, players, and how to gain this. We are reaching back to the same question all the time. Does society need us?
It is the point that keeps on coming up. What is the place of singing in society? What is the place of choral music in society? Or how can you define choral music? What is choral music? You know, it's that, yes, and we've heard fantastic examples of different types, and the. On the very first day, the wonderful Welsh folk tune, Callan Lan, being sung with a huge instrumental backing by these young boys. Fantastic to see so many young men singing. Fortunately, there seems to be something that is being encouraged, beginning to work at home in the UK. But there are different ways of approaching everything, and what we need, I feel, listening to so many great thoughts over the last few days, and listening to people's approach on creativity in the classroom, or creativity in the choral room. One doesn't need to divide, except if you are not going to, with a professional choir, start improvising with the choir during a rehearsal. Very unlikely, unless the composer has asked for it. But that at all sorts of levels, a more creative approach can develop in the singers a greater sense of responsibility. And a greater sense of involvement, therefore, which is, of course, we want them all to be very much involved. Ildikó.
During my long experience being a teacher and sitting at every early summer in the so-called admission or preliminary test in our institutions, my main question was always, what is the applicant's personality? And behind the musical gift or highly educated instrumentalist, the big question was for me always, how can I touch his or her personality? Is he or her a good person? Shall I give him or her the right to stand in front of a group of students or group of people or group of an orchestra or choir? What can she or he transmit? How can use the music to open their soul? And until now, I really don't know the good answer. How can we select the personality behind the musicality or the good training?
Very good point. I mean, we all know that successful music teachers make a difference in a school, to the whole school. We all know that. We don't know who's going to be the good music teacher until they're doing it. We don't know who's going to be a successful, really successful conductor until we see them doing it. And there's no one way. One thing that I do believe strongly, and when I'm teaching, is that we avoid as a principle in our courses telling people to do something. We might advise them not to do something quite frequently, but they have to find a way, try another way, try a way. It has to come from them rather than being put on from the outside. I believe that's really important in conducting, not to, it must be done this way. Is impossible then for the person to be creative, it seems to me.
With all the respect I have I must say, I don't know if I would use my sins for students who want to study conducting to ask them too much questions of morality, because they want to learn something, and I must do my part of this to encourage them. And of course, they have to respect the person. And of course, they have to respect the group. And of course, they must have a very good social ability and social quality. This is no doubt. But I can say all teachers who want to make the starting exam to study teaching, they have to play the first instrument, they have to play the second instrument, they have to make some ear training and some contrapunct. But since 3 years, every teacher also has to make a little 10-minute session with a little group. And you can believe me that all the other colleagues of mine are coming to this 10 minutes rehearsal because they want to know how is the personality, I would say, of this person, when we can help him to say, this is a good idea to study teaching. I told that the point of morality is not mine in this, but of course it's mine to say it's a good decision from you to study teaching, or it's also a very good decision to say, no, you shouldn't do this, because this is hard at the beginning. But if we are not clear and if we are not help the people to find what is good for them, then we have teachers who are normally teaching up to 65 and they are going to be retired with 52, with burnout and more. So we have to make, also they have to make a decision. They want to study, and also we have to make a decision. This is our work to do, and we should help them to get their decision in a surrounding.
Excuse me. Many decades before, we also had this trial with the 10 minutes, and it was very useful, although sometimes a 0 first year is helping the most, because during a year we can see how a personality is able to develop, because the minute, the instant when she or he is coming to the admitting exam, he is set up. And otherwise, in a normal and quiet situation, maybe that not the same human outstandings are coming out, but a very different personality is standing before us, where we are able to do something and sometimes we aren't able to do something. So it is always a trial.
That's very true. There was, I worked many years ago with, in a school where the headmaster was eccentric and spent a lot of the time not being a headmaster as far as the school was concerned, but he was absolutely brilliant at choosing teachers. And he could spot straight away if somebody was going to work in the classroom or not. And so he could afford to be away a lot because the school ran very well without him because he was so good at choosing staff. And on the occasion when one head of department overruled him, the head said, okay, you can appoint this man, but he will be hopeless. And he was. absolutely hopeless. He didn't look it. He seemed a lovely man. He was a lovely man, and he worked so hard. I've never known anybody work harder, but he was absolutely hopeless in front of a class of children. And this guy could spot it. Walked into the room. Nope. And that's part of conducting. That's part of. I mean, a conductor is a teacher at whatever level. If you're surely teaching and conducting are the same thing, as you've already said, and we have to develop those skills. The biggest of which is man management. I think almost the most important is that personality, that command of people. But it's maybe being approached in a different way now from the past. It needs to be. In the professional world, conductors. Very few conductors can get away with behaving as conductors, orchestral conductors did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Thank God, the world has changed, and in that way, for the better, one hopes, on the whole. So where do we go from here? What do we do in terms of trying to pull things together, if you like, with a European perspective, with a world perspective? What do we want to see? What improvements do we want to see? What models do we want to spread wider, do you think, to make the world a better place for singers? I mean, I so take on board all these things that have been talked about so much, and the different types of choirs that are happening are really very important. The different types of ensembles, that we don't just have the concert choir. We don't want to lose the professional choirs, both of them. So we haven't addressed this question as to whether you can earn your money as a choral conductor, earn your living as a choral conductor, as a full-time. So please.
I can answer. I cannot. And I think it's not only in Estonia, but I've heard from many colleagues, especially, for example, in Russia, it's very difficult also. Now we are really speaking about this. If the music teacher is able to be a conductor also, and this is in Estonia, it's quite common that all the who have choirs and are choir conductors have their main job as in music field anyway, but mostly as music teachers. So though it's a picture now, there are some differences also. There are some schools who are asking to conduct their children choir, a higher professional conductor than is the singing teacher. That is nothing bad to be said about the singing teacher, but she or he doesn't want to do this job, have not time or have not skills, have not trained to that. I think this is a good idea to principals of the schools to encourage them that have a professional. Your children will just sing better, and their chords are better taken care of. So this is a position.
I saw that in Singapore. I observed that they have not a competition, but the choirs of the schools are evaluated. This was the high schools. The secondary schools take several days, but the high schools, there are 16, I think, high schools in Singapore. Every one of them had a mixed voice choir of at least 40 singers. And they had to sing in English repertoire, they had to sing traditional repertoire, they had to sing an Asian choral piece. And the standard was quite staggering. And one conductor was conducting 3 of those choirs. He's a professional conductor. And they had a relatively small number of conductors. The standard was amazing, absolutely. They decided that was the way they were going to go, and it's that's an elite part of their education, I think.
Just one word about Japan. I run several courses in Japan in the last 25 years, And it is so surprise for us, for Europeans, that there is not the same organized music teaching in schools, but there are hundreds, thousands of choirs, amateur choirs, and all the members, the singers of the choirs, paid for the conductor. So that's totally the opposite what we have in Europe. We are asking the singers, please come and join to our choirs. But there, they are paying the children's choir, the amateur adult choir as well, and the conductors, number 1 or number 2, or I don't know how many. They normally have 7, 10, or 12 choirs and assistants. So that's a way of living, being a choral conductor.
Yes, go to Japan.
Too much. Anyhow, too much.
Interesting.
Sorry, the word assistant is bemusing for a conductor, really, isn't it? For a choral conductor. There are clearly models of education in general, which are admirable, and there are clearly ways in which we can take some. We would like to have something from each of these countries to add to our into the mix. I think is very good. It's almost impossible to say everybody should, because each country, each tradition needs to be guarded. And I think that's very, very important. Maybe in England we don't have a very strong folk music tradition, although what Joy is doing at the college is fascinating. But the Welsh, for example, have a very strong singing tradition, as you probably know, with the wonderful folk melodies. The Scottish do, and the Irish have a lot of very fine choirs. I was in Dublin 2 weeks ago listening to school choirs with lots of boys singing there. Again, male voice choirs from a boys' school and mixed choirs. Very, very high standard. Very, very impressive. That particular thing, I think, does arise from a closeness to their tradition, to their folk tradition, and the Irish are a very singing people. I wanted to pick up on one thing that which was related partly to the tradition of improvisation that people were talking about, but also something that Eva mentioned this morning, and that wonderful phrase, the right not to know, and the right to make mistakes. And I think we have in music, in schools in Britain, every child composes. Those of you who heard Joy's lecture this morning know that this is the national curriculum is built on the 3 principles of listening, composing, and performing. Composing and performing informing the listening, and that they all work together as such. Now, the word was composing, and when the national curriculum was set up, it was very clearly established that it was the process that was the interesting thing, that children would learn the process of composing, not become composers unless they had a particular gift. Unfortunately, of course, how do you assess the process? And in the end, of course, you assess the finished product, so it becomes composition, and it's not ideal, but the process is fascinating and good for young people to be involved. And I used to say when I was teaching in schools, when this curriculum first came in, I said, this is a fantastic opportunity for you as students, as pupils. This is the only classroom where nobody can say, that was wrong. Because when you're composing, nothing is wrong. And it's a liberating thing. And eventually they began to realize that was true. They had the chance to do something completely different, and it was acceptable. It might not work very well, but they'd had a chance to do it. And a jazz musician once said, had this wonderful phrase, he said that wrong notes were presents. They came to him like presents, because if he played a wrong note, it gave him a new idea. And that's a great thing about improvising and creativity, that we need to. I'm talking too much again. Yes, please, Michael, say something.
Well, I think that my point is not to stop you, but to say another aspect, because I think we are in a very specialized world, and this specialization includes that we should build conductors with the best things we can give, but we should also ask not only how can I study and where can I study, but we should also ask with what aim are you studying? Because we are changing so much, and also we must change our ideas where a choir could be. We have heard in the morning from prison choirs. We have in Cologne a so-called in German Schreichor. They are only with 140 decibels crying at the stage, and you must throw away some aesthetic ideas, and you must trust that you get perhaps some new one. So we have so many choirs, and we have so many situations, and I think in the moment we are not able to suit to all these situations, because the social and the pedagogic abilities are much more to strengthen.
Limited.
In the moment, I think they are limited, and this is a wide area where we have to do many homeworks, I think.
Anybody else like to pick up on that point?
I think if there was just an idea I had here, that when we try to improve or to show what is the importance of singing or also conducting with the singing, we have asked to come more and more scientists to say that we are doing the right thing. For example, this neuroscientist yesterday, Thomas, was opening my eyes that I was very happy that I'm not on a wrong path, that I'm okay, that's it. But I hope that such kind of very clever people should also speak more and more in our societies. Then we may be having the possibility to reach to that point that society understand that's also okay.
That's very true, and I think one thing we've had this informally discussion that in most countries the decisions, of course, the important decisions in terms of money and education and everything are made by politicians who are all short-term, relatively short-term in this day and age. This is the disadvantage of democracy from that point of view. There's a 5-year probably maximum. Yeah. And so things keep on changing. Ideas keep on changing. New initiatives come and go. And it's very difficult within the teaching profession or at any level, whether specifically musical or in general educational. It's very, very difficult to make long-term plans and to persuade. Everybody knows there's plenty of scientific proof that singing, playing an instrument, both improve the general educational worth of the student. Everybody knows this is a well-chosen path. In Britain, we have fantastic youth orchestras. The National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain is superb. We have the National Youth Choir of Great Britain, also splendid. We have a fantastic amount of music making, despite the fact that nobody in power seems particularly interested. They'll take the credit. I think the European Youth Orchestra had over 50% of the players came from Great Britain at one stage. But this is, unfortunately, the problem is that this becomes a class system, because the people who can afford to have lessons and at a high level tend to be people from the better off section of society, and this becomes divisive, and which is the last thing that music should be. So it is very, very, very frustrating. I mean, there's one word I would like to apply to education, particularly after listening to what I've listened to this week, in our future training of conductors. One word, and musicians in general, and music teachers, is the important word is flexibility. We can't just be one thing anymore. And if we're going to serve society, if we're going to justify our position, and Eva said this morning, you can't go into your job without knowing what it is. You have to define your job. You have to define a case. You then have to look at it as we've heard already. We have to look at where we belong in society. Are we delivering what we could be delivering as musicians? Certainly to a certain part of the population we are, but there's a large part of the population we're not. So we need to develop. I don't mean we need individually ourselves to change what we do, but we need to widen and encourage the widening for all musicians, but particularly for conductors.
Yeah,
oh God, good. We all agree on that. That's good. That's good. We'll write that down. We haven't had anybody saying anything. Is everybody still there? Anybody like to add anything to the discussion that we've had so far? Because we're all getting hot and tired up here. So I'm sure it's nearly coffee time, but. Because it's just been so stimulating. I've got so many ideas in my head.
Let them go. We can continue. Sorry.
Don't feel you have to. We just see there are some people here. That's good.
Sorry.
Challenges and problems. I think we've covered most of the. It's easy to. The problems are constantly being discussed. I neglected to say that one of the reasons that singing in schools died in England to a certain extent was our extremely mixed culture that we have now in terms of our community schools, our normal state schools, particularly. We always had a school assembly at the beginning of the day with a hymn. So if they did nothing else, they sang a hymn every morning. But that is not socially possible anymore because it becomes divisive. So the upshot of it is that gradually singing dropped out of schools, and we now have maybe 2 generations or 3 generations of primary school teachers who never sang when they were at school. So how can you give them the courage and the ability to stand in front of their class and lead singing? It's very difficult when they don't have that. To try and reintroduce it is a real challenge. Anything to add, ladies, gentlemen? I don't think there's any point in carrying on just to fill the time, unless we start a totally new discussion. So if there are any questions to any of my distinguished colleagues here, I'm definitely feeling it must be more or less coffee time, and that gives us a little more time to get some fresh air before we come back for the final summary. So can I say thank you very much for those of you who've managed to sit through this, and a huge thanks to my colleagues here.